Good evening. You're now watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Vincent Chan, and here's a look at tonight's top stories. COVID measures deprive Hong Kong of staging an international dragon boat competition. The health minister hints that hotel quarantine may end soon. And in London, mourners brave the cold and endure a wait of up to 24 hours to say goodbye to the Queen. Hong Kong has lost a chance to host an international sporting event. The venue for next year's World Dragon Boat Racing Championships was switched to Thailand because of Hong Kong's strict COVID measures. Isaac Lee reports.
Local dragon boat racers and enthusiasts will be disappointed, as the World Championships next year will be held in the Thai resort of Pattaya. The tournament is staged by the International Dragon Boat Federation in a different place every 2 years. It was supposed to be held in Hong Kong in August last year, but was cancelled altogether because of COVID. The federation had planned to hold next year's competition in Hong Kong, also in August. But the city's strict quarantine rules prompted the organizer to opt for Thailand instead. Apart from losing the hosting rights for the World Dragon Boat Championship, other sporting events in Hong Kong have also been scrapped. The organizer of the Hong Kong Marathon, which had been scheduled for November, called off the race yesterday, saying it had waited too long for a green light from the government. Oxfam, meanwhile, announced that its annual fundraising Trail Walker will be held virtually for the second year in a row. The charity said the authorities rejected its plan to reduce the number of participants in a physical event by 75%. The New World Cross Harbour Race is one of the few large-scale events that will go ahead as planned in late October. There will be a maximum of 1,500 swimmers, all of whom have to be triple jabbed. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
Health officials say they need to wait before determining whether COVID cases have peaked. New infections remain below 10,000 for the 8th day after an expected surge following the Mid-Autumn Festival did not happen. Chloe Feng reports.
The Center for Health Protection said 8,278 COVID infections were recorded today. They included 129 imported cases. Another 16 people died from the virus. An expected surge in cases after the Mid-Autumn Festival holidays has not happened, but health officials say they will need a few more days before assessing whether infections have peaked. They also said from today, children under 12 years don't have to be double jabbed to enter Hong Kong. That's because children in other regions may have difficulty getting vaccinations. Sarah Ho of the Hospital Authority warned that the public health system remains under pressure as about 300 COVID patients are admitted to hospital daily. Officials reiterated that COVID and Omicron subvariants are not comparable with flu because of COVID's higher fatality rate, which has been minimized under epidemic curbs. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
The government has stopped issuing provisional vaccine passes to unvaccinated visitors. Currently, visitors from the mainland, Macau or Taiwan can enter Hong Kong even if they have not received a single jab. With a 6-month vaccine pass, they can even go to restaurants or cinemas. The loophole triggered a controversy after an unvaccinated Shenzhen tourist wrote on social media that she used a temporary pass to visit theme parks. The health minister has hinted that hotel quarantine may be scrapped soon. Arrivals may have to monitor themselves for a week instead. Isaac Lee reports.
Many Hong Kongers can't wait to fly to their favorite destinations again, but are held back because they have to be quarantined in a hotel on their return. But there's a hint that the requirement, which has been in place since 2020, may be lifted soon. Health Chief Lo Chou Mao told a radio show that the government is considering a 0+7 policy, meaning arrivals can skip hotel quarantine and will only have to undergo 7 days of self-monitoring. He hinted that the relaxation may happen before November, when 2 financial forums and the rugby sevens are scheduled.
The policy, the government strategy is to resume international connection as soon as possible. This is always on our strategy list.
Low also defended the government's slow progress in reopening borders, saying it wants to avoid additional pressure on the medical system.
The total death of COVID in this year, 2022, has exceeded 9,000. And we can't just look at the past 3 months. Because of this large number of COVID patients in our healthcare system, our overall healthcare service has been reduced.
Those comments came after former Hospital Authority Chief Lam Pek Yin said the fatality rate of COVID is similar to that of flu. He criticized the authorities for taking too long to put the city back on the road to normality. Atakli, HKIBC.
The government is to inspect more than 10,000 flame trees following a near disaster yesterday. An expert says officials should select trees along roadsides more carefully. Chloe Feng reports.
Development Secretary Bernadette Lin says the authorities are concerned about the latest tree collapse, in which people in 4 vehicles had a narrow escape. A 15-meter-tall flame tree crashed onto the vehicles yesterday, injuring 3 people slightly on Perth Street in Ho Man Tin.
都即時做一個嘅復檢同埋巡查。
Lin said over 10,000 flame trees along roadsides will be inspected by the end of the month. All other types of trees, totaling around 1 million, will be checked in phases in an exercise that could be completed before the end of the year. A dedicated team will be set up to review the government's tree management guidelines and enforcement to see if improvements can be made.
可能我哋過去咧有陣時會聚焦有呢棵樹病啊，咁我哋醫佢啦咁。
Lin noted that in the past, the focus was on treating trees that had diseases. Some trees, she said, were planted more than 100 years ago. Because of changing conditions, society might have to make hard decisions on whether to preserve certain types of trees. Some local tree experts said the government should select species along roadsides more carefully.
That one that fell over is Fung Wong Mok, is a Delonyx flame tree, and they need a lot of space to develop their roots healthily. They tend to have rather fragile wood. We would not actually plant that tree today in that situation. Probably planted, I guess, maybe 50 years ago, and it outgrew the space available for it, especially under the ground, and that made it unstable, and then it just fell down.
Coates said the collapse of one tree does not mean that others of the same species should be removed. That will depend on age and location. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Overseas, mourners in London have shrugged off the biting cold and await as long as 24 hours to file past the coffin of Queen Elizabeth. As foreign leaders arrive to join Britons for the funeral, rehearsals have been held and security tightened. Sachin Kavi reports.
Mourners have been waiting in line for almost 24 hours to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth, who died last Thursday at the age of 96. The queue was up to 8 kilometers long, and despite the overnight temperatures dropping to single digits, people kept coming. For many Britons, the Queen, who ruled for 70 years, was the only monarch they knew. There were some familiar faces lining up to file past the Queen's coffin during her lying in state in Westminster Hall. Among them, David Beckham, the former England football captain.
I know what it meant for us to step out onto that field and to represent our Queen and our country and the Three Lions, and when we are out there, it gives us the opportunity to celebrate in a way that only football can and the football fans can.
Like many others, Beckham waited for more than 10 hours before making it inside Westminster Hall. There, King Charles stood vigil at his mother's coffin. He was joined by his siblings, Prince Edward, Princess Anne, and Prince Andrew in military uniform. They stayed for 15 minutes as people continued to walk past. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was one of the first foreign leaders to pay tribute to the Queen. She will be joined by about 100 presidents and heads of government, plus overseas royals for the state funeral on Monday. In the early hours of this morning, thousands of military personnel took part in rehearsals for what will be one of the biggest events in British history. It could also be a security nightmare. There has already been a scare after a man appeared to rush at the Queen's coffin. He was arrested under the Public Order Act. Sachin Katwi, HKIBC.
Vice President Wang will represent President Xi Jinping at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth. Wang visited the British Embassy in Beijing last Monday to pay tribute to the Queen and sign the condolence book. Confirmation of Wang's trip comes a day after some Chinese government officials were barred from going to Westminster Hall following concerns raised by some British MPs about China's human rights record. Countries which have diplomatic ties with Britain have been invited to the funeral. The governor of Florida has defended his decision to send dozens of migrants to Martha's Vineyard, the holiday home in Massachusetts for wealthy Americans.
One of the reasons why we want to transport, because obviously it's expensive if people are coming here. It taxes social services and all these other things. But it is also the case that, every community in America should be sharing in the burdens and shouldn't all fall on a handful of red states.
Florida spent $600,000 to fly the migrants north from the state of Texas, which has also been complaining about the influx of people crossing the border with Mexico. It's part of a move by Republican governors to send migrants to states and cities led by Democrats. More than 10,000 migrants have been moved in the past 4 months. The controversial transfers are expected to be a hot potato in the coming midterm elections.
Many of them arrived in Martha's Vineyard, not only needing food and shelter, but needing emergency medical services. Children being rushed to the hospital because they were left unattended in Florida and Texas. This is cruel and inhumane. It is completely a deprivation of their human rights to transport them while visibly and noticeably injured. This is just inhumane.
More local news. 2 more Hong Kongers suspected of being lured by fraudsters to Southeast Asia have asked the government for help. The Security Bureau said of the 46 Hong Kongers who requested assistance, 33 were confirmed safe, and most have returned home. But 13 others are still being held, 9 in Cambodia, 3 in Myanmar, and 1 in Laos. Security Secretary Chris Tang told cable TV that officials have been able to contact them directly or through their family members. He pledged to use all possible means to bring them back. Onto the weather now. It will be a sizzling Sunday with the mercury hitting a maximum of 34 degrees. The haze will persist with a few isolated showers. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Saturday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Vincent Chan. Good evening.